Welcome back to Breakfast from Triathlon Business International. My name is Bob Babbitt, and you can check us out on EnduranceSportsWire.com, RacePlace.com, and Babbittville.com. Our next guest, Rich Harshbarger from Running USA, the CEO. So, Rich, take me back. Swimming, is that your sport growing up?
Sure, yeah. I grew up as a swimmer. I swam ever since I was a little kid and all the way up through college.
And where? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Northern California in the Bay Area.
Okay, hotbed of swimming.
Absolutely. I swam with a lot of the greats, a lot of Olympians, Summer Sanders, and Matt Biondi, and Mary T. Maher, and all of those folks, Pablo Morales. I was recruited, went to the University of Kansas, and just stayed in the Midwest after that.
And what were your events?
I swam backstroke and butterfly.
Okay, and so out of college, was Olympics a thought, or?
Oh, always a dream, but I wasn't that good. I was good enough to get it paid for school, but not good enough to go on.
So when you leave the competitive swimming world, there's still, people still want to be fit. When did running enter your life?
I was a newspaper executive for many years and was in charge of consumer marketing and event marketing. I was in Detroit working for the Free Press.
Yes.
And they said, "Oh, you also are in charge of event marketing, and we own a marathon." So,
what I love about your background is the integration side, because you had the Free Press. You had You're the Free Press. You had Detroit News, the Free Press, and the websites, and this event.
That's right.
And what I always love is when people go, okay, I've got all these things, and rather than keeping them separate, how do I use everything to promote all of it?
Well, indeed, and marketing is something that is true for all events. It's a critical thing that people must produce consistently to be able to attract and maintain sponsors as well as participants. And so I think using our media team and our marketing know-how really helped propel the Detroit race to higher levels.
30,000, right? You had 30,000 people there.
That's right.
And people look at, when you look at rock and roll and places like that, you're talking destination. You're talking about going to San Diego or Arizona. Detroit doesn't necessarily come up in the top 5 of people's destinations.
Well, it didn't then. And certainly when you think about growth, you don't think about Detroit.
No.
And I was grateful to be able to work with the city and to work with the course designers and the authorities to really create something dynamic and something that was destination worthy.
What did you change in terms of the marathon itself, in terms of become a destination?
Well, I think what we did is we marketed a sense of place. And so Detroit is the home of auto. It put the world on wheels. It's the only place where the United States is actually south of Canada. So we worked with our partners in Ontario and Windsor to create an international experience and a destination so people could come to see Detroit and see the real Detroit and not see what they thought was going to be Detroit.
So when you come on board Running USA about a year ago,
yes, sir.
What challenges did you face coming in?
Well, certainly, working for a large corporate for-profit entity, going into a not-for-profit, working, for a bureaucratic hierarchy, now working for a board of directors, working in a virtual environment where, our staff and our team all work from home. So there were a lot of fundamental changes that needed to take place, but it is so inspiring to be involved in an industry that's growing.
What I love is 350 members, you oversee events with, 2 million finishers, $6 million in prize purse. I mean, that's a big responsibility.
It is a lot of responsibility, but it's one that it's an honor to be part of. And that is because I think that event directors across the country are fulfilling dreams. And whether that's a weight loss story or a fundraising story.
Overcoming cancer, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
Our sports serve as a way to let people know that anything is possible.
I had the good fortune of being able to stand at the finish lines of so many races this past year, and it never gets tiring to see those stories, to see those faces when they cross.
What I tell people all the time is we go to parties every weekend. Every one of these events. Nobody's coming there because they're forced to go there.
Right.
They're spending money to come to these places to fulfill a dream in a lot of times, but also to change something about themselves.
Absolutely, and whether you've done it 25 times or this is your first time, there's always something that people take away from it. Whether it's helping someone else on the course or putting a notch on their own goalpost.
So when I talk about $6 million in prize money across the board, how important do you think the elite side of it is for your average race director in terms of investing in that part of the business? Because it's always hard for a race director to go, what's going to move the needle for me? What's going to change the perception of my event to get more participants?
Well, that's such a difficult question to answer because, at the world major level or at the the domestic...
New York, Boston, things like
sure,
that.
then, that's critical to help get television rights and to get more media earned attention.
Yes.
The role that elites play in maybe tier 2 events, from a pure event director standpoint, I think it's a difficult question because those are events that also often don't have doping policies.
Right.
To be able to say, so they're putting $20,000 on the line in terms of a purse, but they don't have a way to, they're not investing in protecting that.
Right.
And, does that really draw people if you are in Cleveland, say in a spring race, and, they do have 25,000 people, what is the role that the elite plays there?
That's a really good question.
And I don't have the answer to that,
No.
but I think that it is important that races across the country, and Running USA in particular, working with track and field, U.S. track and field, are able to still support athletes, especially those athletes that are 1 to 3 years out of college, people who still think that they can and still want to get to the podium.
Yes.
But are working 2 jobs as a barista and a dog
Yes.
walker and a house cleaner just so that they can continue training.
And the hard part is you come out of this cocoon of support, which you can relate to because you were a swimmer in college, but you still have this Olympic Jones, and you want to stay in, but you have to support yourself.
It's often
tough.
difficult because you athletes continue to have that competitive spirit.
Yes.
But there are so many ways that even if their athletic aspirations are not attainable, there are so many ways in this sport, in this industry, that they can still contribute. And whether that's through coaching or advocacy or fundraising or even on the on the governing body sides, there's still room for those folks.
Now, were you a runner before you were running the Detroit Marathon?
Full disclosure, no. I think that sometimes it's definitely helpful to understand the
Yes.
sport. But my coaches, if you went back and asked any of my coaches, I was a horrible runner. I have done 5Ks and 10Ks.
Yes.
And that, but no.
You've pretty much stayed away from a lot of running.
Yes.
Right.
That was not one of my favorite training.
So when I look at running, and I look at the television I see on television coverage that I see on running, and we do an award show every year, and we look for good footage from running. It's and from triathlon. You look at the Ironman show as the gold standard of phenomenal storytelling and just great graphics. Does running need better television, or is that something that's important from a Running USA perspective?
I think it is. I think whenever there's a start line, however many people are in the field, that's how many stories there are.
Yes.
Whether it's a small race in Des Moines or a world major in a metropolitan city, there's so many stories to be had. And I think whether that's on a national level or on a local level, and in fact, I think the local media, are finding these stories out with these folks who are doing more and more fundraising. They're losing weight.
Yes.
They're making a difference in their local communities. And so while I know that people watching this are events of all sizes,
Yes.
the idea that local matters, and all race directors have to do in order to get that scale is to find those stories and help the media do their own jobs.
Does Running USA share a responsibility in telling those stories and creating a television side of Running USA?
Well, we're the trade association for the business, and so I think that we have a responsibility to educate and help make race directors more relevant in their own markets.
Yes.
I think that track and field is better positioned, and other organizations are better suited to do that on the consumer side.
What I've seen as the biggest change in running in the last 10, 15 years has been, the number of women running. Like 65% of rock and roll events are women. Is that something that's sustainable, or is that something that even can become a higher percentage?
I think it could go higher. Women oftentimes don't make time for themselves. their moms, their wives, their
Good point.
girlfriends.
Yeah.
They're caring for their parents. They don't make time enough for themselves. And so now with the social switch of the sport, where people are doing more things together and in small groups,
Yes.
that women have the ability to not only reclaim some of their athleticism and their fitness levels, but they also have the opportunity to add huge economic drivers to this industry. They're the ones that come out and say, well, I have the half-zip hoodie in black, but I kind of want it in pink, and then I want the matching shorts, and then I want the long sleeve one too. And that might sound trite, but it really is an economic driver for the sport. And
No question.
then
No question.
that-
Yes. Well, the expos have become a shopping experience where
Absolutely.
they never were. When guys came, we
Right.
showed up, got our numbers, and left.
Yep.
How I call it we've got the entertainment dollar, and we have the active entertainment dollar, where people can be doing obstacle races, they can be doing triathlon, they can be doing running. How does running hold on to those dollars and make sure that that running continues to grow?
Well, I think it goes back to the race directors and their overall responsibility to set their race apart.
Yes.
Every weekend, there are 10, 15 different races going on within a 20-mile radius of where anyone lives. And so what is the differentiating point? Why would I want to come to Canton instead of running Toledo?
Right. Yeah,
When it's the
yeah.
same event, same distance, so you differentiate on your course, your medal, your VIP experiences. Competition is good.
Yes. So, as somebody who specializes in business integration, how do you create a closer relationship between your race directors, your manufacturers, your retailers, and your end user, the runner themselves?
Well, it's a balance, and one of the things that Running USA is working very hard toward this year is more content marketing, the ability to actually educate race directors all year long. I was with a race director who said, I need to buy 25,000 shirts, and I want the tech ones, the ones that wick.
Yeah.
Well, not all tech shirts wick.
Yeah.
And she didn't know that.
Yes.
And so the clothing manufacturers have an obligation to say, yeah, I can compete on price and style and color and feel, but also on the technology and the innovation of their own products. And so that's the kind of content that I'm hoping to further a dialogue among our members.
And in terms of your goals over the next, we got the Olympics coming up in 2016. What are the goals for Running USA that you've set out
Well,
there?
we're very excited to continue to grow our annual conference. We're adding an additional conference this year to.
Oh, you're adding a second conference?
We're adding a second conference to talk about what can non-traditional or obstacle events learn from traditional road races,
Yes.
and vice versa. We think that it's very important that as the market continues to become saturated with more events,
Yes.
and events that are different than traditional road races,
Right.
there's something to be learned there. And so we're hoping to be able to further the education and grow our base this year.
Well, the reality is that back in the day, if you were a runner, that's all you did. And if you were a guy who worked out in the gym, that's all you did.
That's right.
Nowadays, your typical person might do a 5K one weekend, a color run the following weekend, a triathlon the weekend after that, and a Grand Fondo. So you've got a person who doesn't necessarily identify themselves as just a runner.
Well, and it's an important distinction. In our annual surveys, there are many people who don't classify themselves as a runner.
Right.
But yet they say, I do 5 halves a year. I'd say that's a runner.
Exactly. But they don't identify themselves that way.
No.
Yeah. And they don't, and you say, oh, you're a competitive runner, they go, oh, no. I'm just out here for, but if they're getting up in the morning and they're going out to an event, that's a pretty big
Or
commitment.
traveling to a race series like
Yes.
rock and roll. If they're
Yes.
traveling to Nashville or Phoenix or Washington, D.C. or Las Vegas, again, they're spending a tremendous amount of discretionary dollars on this, and they're doing it because they like the experience.
You mentioned that you've spent a lot of time at finish lines this year, cheering people in. Was there been one story that moved you more than others from an athlete who overcame something to get to that finish line?
The first thing that comes to my mind actually is I was handing out heat sheets at the New York City Marathon this year, and it was the first time that I'd been to that event. And a quick side story, I actually got yelled at and was semi-fired from the
volunteer role?
from the heat sheet coordinator because I was unrolling too slowly. So I'm like, okay,
I'll unroll faster.
I'll try to unroll faster. So she moved me from 63rd Street to 68th Street in the Central Park. But standing there handing out heat sheets to these folks who just were so grateful
Yeah.
to have, have the volunteers out there. And, there's not one particular story that stands out,
Yeah.
but just so many people who are high-fiving and thanking the volunteers. And,
Yeah.
it's inspiring.
And that's an important part of what you, in terms of, a lot of times we sit in our office and we're dealing with numbers, but being out there at finish line and being able to hand somebody a blanket after a race, it keeps you in touch with why we do what we do.
Oh, absolutely. It never gets old for me, getting up at 4:30 and standing there. And I always say, put me to work.
Yeah.
I'll eat your food, in your VIP tent or wherever you'll have me. But I like getting to work.
I love that. Rich, congratulations on everything you guys
Thank you
are
so
doing.
much. Thank you for having me.
Running USA has done phenomenal work to keep people in the game of running and to coordinate. Again, you have everybody with their own agenda, and it's when everybody works together,
That's right.
it all works best.
Thank you very much.
Love it. Rich has been our guest again. You can check us out on BabbittVille.com, EnduranceSportsWire.com, RacePlace.com. My name is Bob Babbitt. Hold on, everyone. We will be right back.